Good morning. Thank you for tuning in, and it's really great to be back with another episode of Your Health Matters. So I also, before we get into our subject matter today, and before I introduce my guests, I want to say thank you for all the wonderful, positive feedback we're getting from previous shows. This show is really about longevity. It has to do with all types of health, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. What we want is to help enlighten people and engage, let's say, well, get world-class experts like my guest today to come on and help us to understand various aspects of life so that we can have our longest health span within our lifespan. And normally, I'd go into a few other things before we get going, but we have a very special guest with us today, and I want to get right into the subject matter of today's show. Joining me today is the author of one of my very, very favorite books that I have ever read, and I learned about it about a month ago. It's called The Nine Pillars of Resilience. The author who's joining me is Dr. Stephen Sideroff. He is a professor at UCLA. And I'm just going to say that this book has really, really changed how I look at a lot of different things in my life, from balance, harmony, to my really regulating myself, which has been a real challenge. My level of awareness and presence and trying to live in the moment. You hear about it, relationships, the level of optimism, self-care, and there's more than that. But what I really, really love about this book is the way Dr. Sideroff talks about the brain and the neuroplastic potential in the brain and how we can use our brain to our advantage to really just create a better life. So, Dr. Sideroff, without further ado, thank you for joining me. It's really a pleasure to meet you. How are you?
I am doing great. That's a great introduction, and you covered a lot of bases in just a few sentences there. So I look forward to us getting into those areas in more detail.
Well, thank you. Yeah, for years and years, I've been reading about and implementing here in my clinic. We do a lot of work with people with neurological disorders or diagnosis, movement disorders, dementia, cognitive decline, Alzheimer's. And the brain is really, for lack of better terms, my target muscle. Okay. I'm going after the brain first because the brain is so powerful. And the fact that we can retrain the brain, and we can learn new things. We can always be learning new things. So for a lot of what we do here, we're really into fall reduction, improving movement, balance, stability, mobility. But the way you have, you dove in with this in the nine pillars and implementing neuroplasticity. First of all, I commend you on this. It's such a beautiful book. I'm curious to know, how did the book come to be?
Well, I'll tell you, it's a process that's been happening over a long period of time because I realized very early in my career that people can be going along pretty well in their lives, but as soon as the stresses build up, their ability to cope starts to fall by the wayside, uh, and other areas of their life, their health, symptoms, all begin to have problems. And so I wanted to address what I thought is one of our primary modulators of our physical, mental, emotional health, and that's chronic stress.
Mm.
And it's true more now than ever before because we're just faced, and I'm sure everybody in your audience would agree, faced with such a myriad of uncertainties, dangers, stresses. People I talk to say I have too much on my plate. There's not enough time in the day. All of these things create additional stress.
Mhm.
We know, if we want to talk about physical health, we know that the primary factor in all physical health is how fast we age. The more we age, the more vulnerable we are to all kinds of problems. Well, we now have clear evidence that stress speeds up the aging process. And
Yeah.
so I wanted to address what I thought was a key to everybody's better health, whether it's physical, mental, or emotional. And so I wanted to design a model and a program of resilience that serves everybody and that can be used by everybody to improve all aspects of their health. And that was the motivation and the driving force behind all of the work I do. All of my research is designed to figure out how I can help people make these shifts, these transformations into more effective ways of living their lives and more effective ways of handling the stress in their lives.
Well, I'll be the first one to admit that chronic stress is something I've been trying to manage for quite a long time, and especially the past few months. In some ways, I feel better than ever, stronger than ever physically, sometimes emotionally stronger than ever, but not that often. Um, so you're talking to one of the kings of having dealing with not the king of dealing with it, the king of having it.
Mhm.
So this is another reason why this book has helped me so much. Just the one of the nine pillars of presence is a huge one
Yes,
because
yes,
time gets away from us. I mean, I have four grandchildren now. I mean, the oldest one will be 4 in November. Where did that time go? And I don't want to waste those times and those beautiful moments not being in the moment. And so
right.
management of stress is something I'm still learning, and I'm learning a lot from it through your book. So I
Well, that's
appreciate that.
great.
Thank you.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Well, I love the premise you're coming from with this. Um, with that said, I'm curious to know, we'll go to a break in a couple of minutes, but do you find that is there a common place where you're starting with people in their stress, like one of the pillars? Is there's a particular pillar that tends to be number one for a majority, or is it all over the board?
No, so I think I can highlight in the short time that we have with each other a few of the pillars that I think are really the starting points. And the first two, number one is mindset. And this is my fifth pillar, mental balance and mastery.
Okay.
And for a becoming more resilient, you want to have what I refer to as a growth mindset. And that's
Yeah.
a mindset that when you look at one of your vulnerabilities, your weaknesses, your shortcomings, however you want to call it, rather than settling and saying, oh, well, I'm just not good at this, instead, with a growth mindset, you say, how can I improve along this dimension? What do I
Mhm.
need to do? What do I need to engage in a process so that I get better at this? So, a
Mhm.
growth mindset in how we approach everything in our lives is the first key. And a growth mindset will lead people to say, take my book and say, I want to grow through this process of becoming more resilient. So that's number one, mental balance and mastery. It's a growth mindset, it's a positive mindset. And it's also the notion of resilience not as bouncing back, but as bouncing forward. And by that, I mean that every time you engage in a stressful behavior, you identify the lessons that you learned from that experience. So the next encounter, you're better prepared for.
Yeah, I love that. There's an old saying I hear a lot. It's not the hand you're dealt, it's how you deal with the hand. And that can be an opportunity. We're going to go to a break in just a minute, but when we come back, we're going to continue with this. I'd like to continue with this topic about bouncing forward. I love that. That's
Yes.
beautiful. Everyone, thanks so much for listening. This is Your Health Matters. My name's Carl Sterling. You're listening to WLAC Nashville, and we'll be back with Dr. Stephen Sideroff in just a minute. All right, we are back with Dr. Steven Sideroff, author of one of my very favorite books, The Nine Pillars of Resilience. You know, the bouncing forward idea, I really like that because you do hear a common saying is bouncing back from this. I'm going to bounce back from this. I never even thought about thinking of it, and it never occurred to me to think about thinking of going forward, but that's a shift in paradigm right there.
Right, exactly, because you don't want to go back to where you were when you encountered that stress, because where you were maybe struggling with not knowing how to handle it. So you want to learn the lessons. And here's an interesting point, and this is very important for a lot of the listeners here. People who identify themselves as being anxious. Now, if you're anxious and you have something stressful and you're worrying about it and it's on your mind and you're losing sleep over it, and then you encounter the stressful situation and you're successful, you handle it. What's the takeaway? Now, if you're not conscious about the process and this notion of bouncing forward, what we unconsciously take away from that is I was anxious, and things turned out okay. And our brain puts anxious and things turning out okay together.
Hmm.
So it, we things didn't turn out okay because we were anxious, but our brain puts those together. And the next stress that we encounter, we automatically go into the same pattern of anxiety
Okay.
because that's what we remember about the last encounter that we handled, because we were anxious perhaps for hours and hours, and the event maybe took just a few minutes. So bouncing forward is taking a moment and saying, wait a second, I handled that really well. I don't need to be anxious the next time I have a stressful situation, because what I've learned from this last one is I'm competent. I did this well, I did that well, whatever you did to create the success, that's what you want to take as a lesson from that experience, not that you were anxious before it. So it's a way of breaking away from old childhood lessons and childhood patterns, which, as we're talking, is my first pillar of resilience, your relationship with yourself.
Okay.
And
Yes.
most of us are burdened in our relationship with ourselves with negative messages from our childhood. We're not good enough. Um,
Oh,
a
yeah, that's a big one.
critical parent. All of these things
Hmm.
create a sense of not being enough, of not being good enough. And when you have that kind of sense about yourself, every encounter is going to be more stressful than it needs to be.
Yeah. Well, let me jump in for a minute because was just talking with somebody. I'm 63. This lady who comes in, just such an amazing person. We were talking about this the other day because she still doesn't feel good enough. And in her case, this comes from childhood upbringing from well, rather critical parents and an older sister who she was always felt she was in the shadow of, but she probably wasn't, she realizes. But when you think you are, well, I think we just get into these habit forming thought pattern, habits of certain thought patterns, and then it just becomes a part of who we believe we are, right? And
Correct. Correct.
it's
Yeah.
almost like it doesn't mean it's true. I dealt with this for so long. I'm not good enough. I can't be a radio show host. I can't be whoever, whatever, and do ever. But there's it, changing this is a big deal. But man, it can open up all kinds of opportunities. I mean, just to grow as a person. I don't mean opportunities
Yeah.
in other ways,
It's
but maybe
so
that too.
right. So it's so important, yet it's very difficult, because if you think that these early lessons are locked into our brain as survival lessons. Our earliest learning is survival lessons, and they keep getting reinforced, and that really establishes our basic neural network. And so, how do you break away from that? And on the one hand, it's difficult, but on the other hand, it's very possible to do. And that's where we want to place our focus, that it's very possible. And this is where the notion of neuroplasticity comes in,
Yeah.
because we have two primary modes for our brain's operation. One is that it wants to hold on to its lessons very, very tightly and very
Mhm.
strongly. Okay. But the other is that we have the tremendous capability of neuroplasticity, of new nerve growth and new nerve connections.
Mm.
And just this 45-minute conversation you and I are having today can literally trigger new nerve projections in our brain, new dendritic connections in our brain. And so, but the key is that we have to be consistent and persistent with the new behaviors and have that growth mindset of bouncing forward. Here's a technique to use for everybody, and that's if we think about the lessons of our childhood, what I refer to as our primitive Gestalt patterns.
Mhm.
If we think about them as being as the voice that we hear 24/7, as being the spokesperson of those patterns. Okay. Now, every time we hear these messages, that's where they're coming from. You're not good enough, or you're walking into a meeting and you start to worry, am I going to say the right thing? Am I going to make a mistake? All of those are coming from that voice, which is why our childhood lessons are so powerful, because we develop this inner voice, and then that goes with us wherever we are, right?
Right.
In fact, I like to tell people that if you're feeling upset, I guarantee you can trace it back to some negative message you're giving yourself.
Mm.
And so I encourage people, when they, first of all, let me take a step back and I identify the qualities of a healthy internal voice or a healthy internal parent. And
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
coming from a place of love, compassion,
Mm.
acceptance, support, care, and joy. Joy has to be in there. Those
Yeah.
are the qualities of a healthy internal parent. So if we set that as our intention, that that's how we want to talk to ourselves in our everyday life, we notice when we're upset, we find the message that we're giving ourselves. You made a mistake. You should have done better. And then we go, wait a second, that's the old voice.
Mm.
And I didn't create that old voice. That was sort of handed to me,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Now as an adult, I get the opportunity to choose. Do I want that, or do I want something that's better, healthier, which is the healthy voice?
Right.
So we hear the old message and its negativity, and then we shift into that healthy voice. And I ask people to imagine that healthy voice coming from those qualities and have it speak to you. And that voice always gives you good messages, always tells you the right approach. And it's an approach that helps you actually feel good about yourself.
Yeah. Boy, this is powerful. I tell you, we could take hours. Well, I could talk for hours about this. We're going to have to do this again, but we're not done. Folks, we're going to go to a break, and then we have two more segments here with Dr. Stephen Sideroff. And be sure to get online and go and get this book. Buy the book, Nine Pillars of Resilience. It is a game changer. You're listening to Your Health Matters here on WLAC Nashville. We'll be back after this short break. And we're back, folks in Nashville area. I want to make sure that you check out the LebanonDojo.com. We have a program starting up there. It's the Ishinru Neuromotor Training Program, designed for 50 plus population, meaning 50 years of age and up. If you're younger than that, we will not turn you away. The idea is to improve the health span within your lifespan, to work on your stability, agility, mobility, cognition, memory, reaction time, balance, strength, and even bone density, believe it or not. Because through the resistance training and those exercise and so many of the other things we're going to be doing, you're going to achieve, you're going to make progress in all these areas. The program starts on Wednesday, September 4th. So be sure to check out the LebanonDojo.com and you're going to love it. We're here with Dr. Stephen Sideroff. And Dr., we were just talking on the break, and that word intention is a really big deal to me. And I'll just tell you a real quick story. I was a musician for a career for over 30 years before I changed careers 16 years ago. And so the best lesson I ever had as a drummer came from a non-drummer. Those were usually the best lessons anyways. And it had to do with concepts. It had to do with what other people in a band would want from a drummer. The best lesson I ever had was from my friend Dave Castiglione, who said, after he got off the Dave Matthews tour, after a few years with the Matthews Band, he says, Carl, you sound really good, but put some intention behind your notes. We went on to his front porch because we were just jamming, just sax and drum duo. I'd never thought about intention. And I was into it 30 years by that point. That changed how I played for the last years I played. And
Mhm.
it changes how I work with people here in my clinic. So intention's a big deal. And what I would love, Doctor, if you could talk about intention with respect to your book and what the message that you're conveying.
Sure, of course. So we were just talking about the neural networks that are set up in our childhood, and that the goal is to create new ways of thinking, new behaviors that begin to establish new neural networks based on a healthier approach to life. And that process is available to all of us. And, I lay it out in my book, but intention plays an important role in this. Intention is what directs awareness.
Mm,
And where you direct awareness, that's where learning will take place. And so resilience is really about opening up to new ways of doing and thinking. Resilience is being open to learning new ways and being willing to challenge the old ways, to be willing to say, all of us have gotten to where we are in life, and to some extent we're successful, and to some extent we're not. But we have difficulty letting go of old patterns because we're afraid of losing whatever edge we have from what we've been able to accomplish.
mhm,
And with intention, you want to say what I've accomplished is not going to go away if I start finding a better, healthier way. I'm going to bring all of those gifts that I've demonstrated over my years with me as I develop new gifts and new abilities.
mhm,
The intention is what directs that process. So we can use intention in many different ways. I just gave you a model of our old voice and a healthy voice. And so intention is the intention to notice when I'm feeling upset,
mhm,
to be present in that moment, to realize I need to call on this healthy internal voice that I'm developing. The more you call on it, the better, the more it develops. The more you call on it, the more you're creating new nerve connections in your brain based on this healthy voice. So intention directs that process to continue that growth, that development.
I love that. I was reading a thing, this is years ago, I was reading a thing about brain imaging out of MIT. I can't remember exactly who the images were of. I mean, these were people who were in, all I know is this, there were people in very negative thought patterns, self, let's say, self-destructive thought patterns. And I don't know if it's through therapies or what. All I know is that they practiced shifting their thoughts.
Mhm.
Maybe it's through affirmations. Don't really know. But what I do know is whenever it was down the road, months or years, imaging showed new areas of the brain lighting up. And these people were in a different place in their life. And I was so pleased to see that this can be possible, that we can actually shift maybe our habitual thought patterns and maybe go from something self-destructive or negative to something optimistic and hopeful and maybe
Mhm.
believing in yourself, because this opens up all kinds of opportunities to grow as an individual. And I love it. It's so fascinating to me.
Yeah, so the analogy I have is you approach this thicket forest in front of you and you see one path. And so you're inclined to go down that one path because everything else is this thicket. The only problem is that one path isn't taking you where you want to go.
Mhm. Yeah, right.
It's the old path. It's the path of the old lessons, right? So that's the first challenge, is to realize if I want to grow, I have to pull out my machete and I have to go over there where there's the thicket and start cutting away and creating a new path, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And every time you come up to this forest, like throughout your day, there are different situations, different choice points. We automatically go down the path of our old pattern. And so intention is to be present enough to realize that that old pattern is not, and going down that path is not going to help me. And I have to stop myself and I have to go over here with a new message and a new lesson. For example, again, my fifth pillar, optimal mind functioning, is a positive perspective. Some people start the day and they look for what can go wrong, and they already create stress in their lives. You want to start the day and think about what can go right. And in
Hmm.
any moment, you want to notice the tendency to be negative. That's the old pattern. That's the automatic. And you want to stop yourself and go, wait a second, how else can I think about this that's more positive? And with expecting better outcomes. So now I got that machete and I'm creating this new path.
Hmm.
And I have to
Hmm.
keep doing that until at some point, if we keep doing this, at some point, the new path is going to start to be more automatic than the old path. And that this is the power of intention to literally re-engineer
Hmm.
the neural networks in our brains. And at first, it's difficult, but gradually it gets easier and easier if you're persistent and consistent.
Yeah, that to me is just, well, it is a game changer. It's a game changer because of what it can do, but the possibilities that come out of that. I often people hear me say things like, try to choose your thoughts. I'm no expert in this like you are, but I know that choosing and directing our thoughts a certain way can really change how we're feeling and so many other things. We have to go to a break. Folks, thanks for listening. This is Your Health Matters, WLAC Nashville. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. All right, we're back with Dr. Steven Sideroff. And folks, I just want to say one more time, be sure to go to levinanddojo.com. The program starting on September 4th is a true game changer. I know I've said it before, I've said it in past shows. We're really here to help people to move better, live better, think better, remember better, and feel better, and improve, let's say, increase the health span within your lifespan. Because, there are a lot of us out there, especially baby boomers. I'm one of them. I can use it. A lot of us can use it, and we're going to do it together. So go to lebanondojo.com, check it out, inquire, and get set up to start. Try out a class. It's going to be a game changer. Doctor, we were talking about, well, your book, of course, Nine Pillars of Resilience. And I would love if you would dive in to your fourth pillar, physical balance and mastery. I'd love to hear more about this because
Right.
this is real
So
important. This is very important.
when people talk about stress management, this is really at the heart of stress management, which is a balance between the branch of your nervous system that activates to stress and the branch that helps you recover.
Mm.
Now, I'd like everybody listening to this to think about their day. Think about going through your day and think about how many times or situations you are stressed or you have a situation that creates stress. And that's any kind of uncertainty, any kind of deadline, any kind of bill that needs to be paid, financial issues. Throughout the day, we all encounter so many different situations that trigger our stress response. But let me ask you this. How many times in your day do you encounter any kind of stimulus that triggers, I'm safe, that triggers, I could let down my guard, that triggers, relax? If you're
Mm.
like me, it doesn't happen in the day. So we are continually activating the sympathetic branch and we're not allowing recovery. And so for physical balance and mastery, we have to, again, the word intention, we have to have the intention of finding time and place where we could say, I can let go, I can relax. And there's two parts to that. One part is literally once a day finding 10 or 15 minutes to practice some form of relaxation, biofeedback, meditation, so that we retrain the brain to go down that continuum of activation. We're continually sending it up.
Wow.
We have to consciously do some things to send it down.
Hmm.
So a practice actually helps you recover the ability to relax. And then throughout the day, you want to find times where you could say, I'm safe, I can let down my guard. And I will say in particular, you want to do that every time you sit down for a meal.
Mm.
Most of us sit down for a meal, but we're still thinking about the stresses of our day. And when we're thinking about the stresses of our day, our body wants to shut down the digestive process. This is why there's so much GI problems in our country today, because we don't give our bodies the opportunity to effectively do the digestion.
Yeah.
So that's the key for pillar number 4, physical balance and mastery, is to have the intention to find ways of recovering from the times that you activate your stress response, which uses up all the resources of your body. You need to find time and place and ways to recover those resources. Sleep is an important component of that. And if you're not getting a good night's sleep, that's one of the places to begin.
We could spend a whole 2-hour show on the word intention, seriously, because my drummer analogy earlier, I can find parallels in it to what you're speaking about. Because I was directing myself with intention, with no pun intended, but what I wanted to come out of this for
Uh-huh.
listeners, right? And so now I'm directing attention, I'm feeling to take more control over my life
Mm-hmm.
and my responses. This has been a challenge for me for sure.
Yeah.
Just from
And
another viewpoint too, is when we're operating from stress and stressors and all that, and the cortisol is jacked up way high. Well, that doesn't help our visceral fat situation at all.
Right.
GI problems are through the roof, and who knows what else.
Yeah.
But you,
But so if you're wanting that increased level of control over your life, pillar number 6 is also so important.
thank you. I want you to talk about this, please. Please do. Yes.
And this is emotional balance and mastery.
Hmm.
So much of the time, and we feel like I can't express my feelings for whatever reason. That person is going to get upset with me if I do, or I can't cry. I'm not supposed to. I'm not supposed to cry. Whatever the reasons are, I'll feel too vulnerable, and so we push those feelings down. We push them to the side, but we don't realize that our bodies are designed to finish unfinished business. If something gets started, our mind body wants to reach conclusion. And every piece of emotion that we push to the side has an energy connected to it and a drive connected to it. And if we don't give it its appropriate attention and awareness, we will drive that energy in the wrong direction.
Hmm.
And what does that look like? It looks like trying to make more and more money, trying to fill an emotional hole, which it will never do.
Yeah.
Making more romantic conquests, other victories out in the world that we're unconsciously trying to really establish a sense of peace and harmony within our bodies. And those things will never do it. What will do it is to address our unfinished emotional business.
Hmm.
And this is so important. And what's so important to realize is if I have an upset with another person, I'm the one carrying that upset. They're not the one carrying that upset. And I'm the one that has to take responsibility for getting to a place of letting go of that. Whether the other person is present or not, because some of our unfinished business is with people no longer in our lives, and
Hmm.
even people who, mother, father, who have died, but we still carry
Yeah.
resentments, upsets, sense of loss. So this is an important process that we all need to engage in. In my book, uh, in this chapter, I take people step by step through a process to let go of unfinished emotional business.
Yes, you do. And I know about that part because I've been working on that part
All right, cool,
with somebody who is no longer here. But this has been a process that's been very helpful
great.
because unfortunately we're almost out of time, but I just want to say thank you for one thing in particular. There are a lot of things. I could go on and on for hours thanking you because there's so much from this book that's helped me. But on this topic, this resentment or issue let's say I've had, that actually gives somebody control without them knowing they have control. They're not even alive to. I mean, what good does that do? It doesn't do me any good. So,
Right, right.
yeah, I appreciate that. Doctor, I want to thank you very, very much for coming on this show. I'd love to do a part two for this Nashville station here. Maybe in a few weeks we can jump on again
I'd
and
love to.
continue because we're
Sure.
barely scratching the surface here today.
Yeah,
Where can people reach you if they want to learn more about you?
yeah.
And where can they get the book?
Okay, so first off, I want to say one of my goals in writing this book is not just to give information, but it's to get results.
Mhm.
And that's why I established the notion of the path that's alongside of us all the time. And the goal is to find that path. But
Okay.
my website is drstephensideroff.com.
I'll have a link
And
in the description. Yep.
right. And if you go there, one of the things that I have as a free gift is a resilience assessment booklet where you can actually determine your own resilience profile. I encourage people to do that. My book is available on Amazon, in bookstores. It's available everywhere.
Beautiful. I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Doctor. It's a pleasure to meet you. A pleasure to have you here on the show. Everybody, as I always say before I sign off, be kind. Be kind to others. Show compassion. Maybe show some love. It's real important. People need this. Do a random act of kindness. You have no idea how it might positively affect somebody. You're going to hear it every show because I
And
believe
give
it's
it to
so
yourself.
important.
And give it to yourself also.
Thank you. Yes, that's true. So, thank you, doctor. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And we'll be back next week with another episode of Your Health Matters. Have a fantastic week.